Hello and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And with me back for the show is Derek Cohen, who is our normal co-host. But you're in a weird position here. You're like really close to me now.
Yeah, we're just kind of phasing you out. I'm sorry you had to learn this way.
Just going to keep phasing me until I'm off
I don't say you
camera.
have all these podcasts handling all the cool episodes and the cool issues.
Well, this is a cool issue.
Yeah.
Today, we did the sports one last time.
Oh, that's true.
We did a sports one. We've always wanted to do a sports one, and we've got tens of thousands of views online on that one, so it obviously was something that people wanted to see. Well, this one, in honor of National Marriage Week and honor of Valentine's Day, this is going to be the love show.
I like how you said that all nice in a Barry White style,
like a midnight radio show. All right, so this is going to be doing our hot take right here at the beginning, and I'll introduce our guest here in just a second, which is why you're sitting immediately to my left.
Yeah, it's really weird you say that after you introduce it as the love show, but just keep going. Just keep going.
Valentine's Day is coming up. This episode should be out before Valentine's Day, and so we will try to educate you on what not to do. So, worst Valentine's Day gift. What's the worst? Maybe the worst specific gift, or maybe even just like the worst kind of gift that you can give for Valentine's
Honestly,
Day.
hot take indeed, because I'd have to say the worst collective gift would probably be candy. And then specifically, and I know this is high heresy in some circles, but would be those like basically hearts made out of chalk. You know,
like the
antacids that are basically carved into a heart shape.
But I thought candy and flowers were like the 1 and 2 of what you're supposed to be giving.
Oh, you think that, huh?
I do think that. I do think they certainly raise the price of them.
This is why we're having this discussion. Apparently,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
why we have to have
you heard it
these
here
folks
first.
on the show.
No candy. I would think like any kind of like household appliance. You know, like a cleaning device of some kind, maybe.
You are so rooted in the past, Brian. I can't disagree with you more.
Really?
I've known people whose wives have asked for appliances. Now trying to clear that table with a gift on Valentine's Day might not be the most judicious way, but I can appreciate that. I will say, can we say any live creature?
Okay, yeah. So if they're not
Mostly a pet.
Yeah.
Mostly.
But what if it's like a Roomba and it's like they don't have to do the work?
I'm pretty sure those aren't alive, but...
yeah.
Nah.
Well, I was thinking about more of my appliance thing. Okay. Yeah. All right. So no appliances and no candy. All right. Well, let's get to our guest so we can talk about relationships and marriage. As we mark National Marriage Week, it's worth asking what marriage means in America today and how the institution is evolving. For decades, marriage was nearly synonymous with adulthood and family life in the United States, but over the last half century, those patterns have shifted dramatically. Fewer Americans are tying the knot, people are marrying later in life, and attitudes toward both marriage and childbearing are more fluid and diverse than ever. National statistics show that marriage rates have declined significantly since the mid-20th century, with a much smaller share of adults currently married than in past generations. At the same time, fertility rates in the United States have fallen to historic lows. These trends reflect deeper social changes. A recent Harvard youth poll found that among young adults ages 18 to 29, only 57% said marriage was important, and less than half considered having children an important life goal. Policymakers across the political spectrum are debating ways to encourage family formation. Some proposals center on pro-natalist incentives like expanding tax credits, paid family leave, child care support, and fertility treatments. A recent Pew survey shows broad public support among those who favor government involvement in policies like tax breaks and child care subsidies, even as a majority still say the federal government should play no role in encouraging more births. As we explore the state of marriage in America, we'll look not just at the data and attitudes, but also what it means for the future of families in America with our two expert guests. Hannah Bruck is a policy scholar here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Noah Torres is a policy analyst, also here at TPPF, and part of our Family Success Project. Hannah, Noah, thank you so much for being on the show here on Love Week.
Lovely to be with you on this auspicious day.
Yeah. Well, just digging into a few things that I talked about right at the top. What do you think? I mean, there's a lot of data out there. I think we're all agreed. Maybe you tell us. Maybe you can dig into the data. Maybe you tell us some things that that we don't know. But most of most of what everybody's seeing is that marriage is trending downward. Hannah, people are waiting longer to have kids. What is that? What do you think is causing that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it comes from kind of the age of technology that we find ourselves in. Dating has been kind of commodified in a way that it never has been before. So young people feel as though they can wait and swipe on until they find the perfect right partner. And what most people likely find is that the longer they wait, the more they realize that the perfect person is not out there. And so then there's this kind of deficit where the person that they marry maybe later in life is no better than the person that they might have married earlier in life. And there's certainly the benefits associated with it. Outside of the age of technology, a lot of what we've been thinking about in kind of the cultural sense is also the economics of marriage and family. Many young people do not have the capital or feel like they have the ability to build a family simply because a lot of the things that they see as being necessary for building that family, like having a certain level of education or having a certain salary at a job or even having access to a house, a home in of itself, not an apartment to start a family, seems out of reach. And so it's kind of this interesting moment where we have technology feeding into a cultural problem alongside economic pressures, and then also this culture of young people that are still kind of conceptualizing what it means to build community outside of kind of this digital atmosphere, this digital space.
There's a lot to unpack there, Noah. What are they, one of the things you kind of hit on a little bit. I mean, you talked about, the sort of the swiping and, and having access to, innumerable number of potential partners through the apps and things like that. But what are they actually waiting for? I mean, what is, what are you seeing out there, Noah? And what do you think people are waiting for? Why are they taking so long to make that decision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when it comes to what people are waiting for, I think young people have been so oversaturated with these, with what they see on social media, what they see in television media, these high aspirations of what they want in a partner. And sometimes those aspirations are just a little, kind of, how would you put it? Just way out there, way just
too high standards or something? Or?
Not that you shouldn't have standards, but I think everyone wants a picture perfect marriage, a picture perfect relationship, and life just doesn't work that way. You will have troubles, you will have difficulties with your partner, you'll have difficulties with your spouse, and to want a perfectly crafted and perfectly tailored pairing of individuals is really not what marriage is for. I mean, marriage is marriage, dating, getting together, having a family. It doesn't presuppose that individuals are going to be perfect, but it does presuppose that they're going to be committed to each other. Mm-hmm. So to really hunt out for just, I have to find the absolute perfect spouse, absolute perfect person who just hits every check mark that I want. As good as it is to have standards, almost pigeonholes and silos these individuals into this, this frenetic, chaotic race to just find the perfect one when, no one's perfect. Soulmates aren't really a thing. You've got to work through it with someone else.
Hot take. Yeah. Soulmates aren't a thing.
Soulmates aren't a thing. We usually put that negative stuff at the end, don't we?
Yeah, right.
No, let me ask you guys, because I think that obviously from my perspective in looking at this issue is something that it straddles the line and fairly widely, between culture and policy, right? And that's, that there going to be some distance between there. So you two are in, it's kind of the driving seat of this particular campaign at TPPF. How would you articulate what a policy portfolio looks like? And I'm not asking necessarily for specific policy items, but what, in other words, is the animating principle and philosophy of a pro-family policy campaign?
Yeah. So I think at the core of a pro-family policy campaign needs to be the awareness that the family is the central unit both for society and the functioning of the individual. So for society, the individual, let's start with the individual. The family is where the individual is raised in all the values that he or she needs to actually succeed in society. So whether that's social responsibility, socialization, emotional intelligence, psychological development, forming bonds with your family members and being taught by your parents and fundamental values and virtues is really the first way that you learn to enter into society and what's expected of you out there in the broader world. So that family unit, being the space for that to happen, is fundamental to the flourishing and success of every other institution in our society. So any policy portfolio with an emphasis on strengthening families or centering families really needs to recognize that families are essential both to the individual flourishing and to broader, the common good of the state and political community.
Anything that yes and?
Yeah, yes, and I think that a lot of what I thought about in the context of what the government's role is in kind of encouraging family formation, because we very much see it as this tension where there are levers that the government should pull and should not pull, and it definitely is not our position that the government should be mandating a certain baseline for marriageable age or a certain number of children that
licensure perhaps or anything like that.
Right. This isn't the Handmaid's Tale, but we do kind of come from it a perspective of any barriers that the government could create ought be removed. So we think about that a lot in the context of welfare and the marriage penalties that exist, just to disincentivize even people that are in maybe the most difficult spaces of life that really would benefit from the kind of not only emotional flourishing, but actual financial flourishing that marriage provides. And they're kind of put in this position where they can't exit that seat of poverty just because there are these levers that push back and penalize them for getting married. So any policy that falls under, like Noah said, supporting the family as a critical institution, supporting the role and the rights of parents to take care of their children as is appropriate, is one that we would find fits into our portfolio.
Do you have a yes and?
I do.
Yeah, you look like you're going to jump in there.
So I will say that like any family policy, basically since the mid 20th century, is going to be influenced by the course of family law. And family law has changed over the course of the American Republic since the foundation. We've seen a variety of approaches to marriages, families, the law of ongoing family, so the relations between members of the family, and then even law relating to like the dissolution of the family. But I think one of the most important trends we need to be aware of is that there may be an increased litigation relating to the family, but family law has been de-juridified. And what I mean by that is that family law is not taking a stance, is not being assertive in the realm of what should it exactly look like? What should relationships, what is expected of a mother, a father, children? There's kind of a blurring of distinct roles. And this is really a consequence of heightened individualism, greater awareness of the equality of the sexes, and that leads us to have to confront and deal with this situation in family law, which is basically kind of bare bones when it comes to prescribing an ideal. So because of that, family policy also needs to be aware of the nature of the legal regime that surrounds the family in the United States, and awareness that the law will not always or necessarily be the primary mover in orchestrating how families ought to behave or how they ought to function, what they ought to look like in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. I think probably like the most important way to put this is, when the law and societal attitudes are in tandem, the law will be a pretty good, have a pretty good effect on human behavior.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into is that whatever government roadblocks there might be, or legal roadblocks, or things that we need to remove from a policy standpoint, there's a lot that are just perceptions about what marriage is and what you're supposed to do as a couple, and how hard it is to rear children and those kinds of things. And yet, our friend Brad Wilcox would remind us over at IFS, the data shows that married couple with families are happier and more financially secure. And so, and yet there's this sort of irony that people believe that, I'm going to be the most happy when I'm by myself and I can do whatever I want, or I need to be financially secure before I get married. And everybody who's kind of gone through the looking glass on that is over here on the other side saying, no, you're going to be much more happier when you get married and start having children, and you're going to be making the kinds of decisions that will secure your future, and you'll become much more financially secure. So it's sort of this irony of, no, marriage is really the first step to get to happiness and financial security. What do we do? And obviously, you can't legislate that. You can't change people's opinions by passing a law. So for an organization like ours or other organizations like IFS and others that are out there promoting marriage, what is it really more of is it more of like a communicative effort to try and convince people that, hey, the grass is greener over here?
I think so. And I think that a lot of what happens on social media can become such a feedback loop to young people who see kind of these influencers traveling the world and doing so on their own brand and being distinct by way of their own branding. And a lot of them get there through kind of silly methods like reality TV shows, or like literally just doing dances to songs. But they gain this cult of personality, and then they live this exciting life, and it's them as a person leaving their family to do so, and their community is online. Their community is their follower base. And so it kind of builds this perception that community can be built outside of kind of a physical context, which I think can be true in a lesser sense. But then it becomes this presumption that no physical community is necessary, which kind of leads us into this other cultural mindset that they get stuck into, of kind of independence being exclusive to individualism online. And so
it sounds like how do we surmount that, or how do we combat that?
Yeah, I think it's just by displaying areas in where marriage has worked well. But even I'm a little bit kind of critical of saying that myself, because I think a lot about kind of like the trad wife movement and how that gained a lot of criticism. But I think that you see a very hopeful group of young people who are not only kind of returning to religiosity, which isn't a necessary condition to want to get married young, but are kind of looking for these connections outside of social media. So I think that this is kind of the prime opportunity to take movements looking at ways in which young couples can co-live in a space and start thinking about a family and afford an apartment together and afford a life together, and kind of blasting that message of not only financial accessibility but also personal happiness. I think that a lot of what is kind of missing from the argument of marriage, that you only hear from older people that are married, which as informed as they are is not very compelling to a young unmarried person, is kind of how much how true it is that the grass is greener on the other side. And so I think that if young people come together and say, no, actually this is a net positive, and it's okay to search for community, even if you can't find a marriageable spouse, because we're getting into, and see, this is the spectrum of the problem. People also don't believe that there is a good marriageable person out there for them, that there is someone that is reasonable enough as a man or as a woman that it warrants losing this individuality. But I think positive messages as to the accessibility, whether financial or personal, of marriage are going to be key in kind of taking this cultural moment of young people being interested in these institutions.
I want to drill down on that just a little bit, because you mentioned, the old heads who maybe not be the most credible messengers here on
the unks.
Yeah, the unks, as you Utes would say. But yeah, you mentioned that, and I completely agree that I think that transgenerational, intergenerational lecturing is not going to solve a problem as fundamental as this. So, as young folk, who would you say would be a great messenger for this message? Who would be great for carrying it? I'd imagine it'd be somebody closer in age to y'all, but like, of what realm of existence would they come from?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if it's any one carrier. I think that Ballerina Farms sent a very strong internet wave kind of into what the value of being a more traditional wife, or the value of having kind of those more traditional ties.
I can't believe you didn't start with the GOAT. I mean, it's Taylor Swift, right? I mean, she's about to get married.
I get, like, this is so difficult, because I do think we have these pop culture models that signify the importance of the institutions. Taylor Swift is getting married. She's engaged. Charlie XCX, for all of her party girl antics, got married last summer. You have shows like The Summer I Turned Pretty, which, as silly and pedantic as it is, it features around a young girl getting engaged at a young age. And then, there's all kinds of twists and turns. But
no spoilers, please. Brian's halfway through.
At least considering marriage. And so I think that the cultural vehicle is out there, but I don't know if I can give one distinct way in which it would be most powerful. I just think more of our media is starting to shift back into maybe being positive and friendly towards these institutions.
But Noah, you're a big Instagram guy.
Great segue.
How do you get the message out?
Well, I mean, when it comes to like individuals to look up to, as much as like I think celebrities do have a role in this, probably one of the most important sources of influence, guidance, and support is going to be community level support. So, whether that's churches, social groups, school, work organizations, whatever it may be, I think it is very important. Sports leagues even, yeah. I think it's very important that individuals are enmeshed in these communities, that we do enough to keep these communities alive.
Well, you've seen those studies where like one person gets married in a friend group, and all of a sudden it's just like boom, 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 boom. Right?
Yeah.
And same with kids.
Exactly. And those are ways for you to meet people, to find support, for people to guide you as to actually what marriage looks like, whether, you have married friends, you have friends who are parents. That's probably one of the most important things to ensure that the family itself is strengthened. Someone on high, like from an academia or whatever, may not be able to teach someone or tell someone exactly what they need to do. But if you have a friend who's really knows what he's doing and has got his stuff together, then that's probably one of the best forms of support.
So another thing I want to ask, and so you mentioned academia has a role on this. One of the things I think that is under discussed, even though I believe we probably talked about it the last time we had Andrew on here to really launch this prior to the last session, really is the success sequence. It's something that I know that y'all are very familiar with. It's something that TPPF is very familiar with. Can you kind of give a little rundown for the audience on what that exactly entails and how that sequential nature actually begets social success?
Yeah. So the success sequence is a educational intervention that would happen 3 times over the course of someone's education in primary school and secondary school. What it would do is basically instruct kids that, hey, there is a life path that leads you to the most, to have the greatest likelihood of personal success and flourishing in your life. So go to school, graduate high school, get a job, get married. If you do those things in that order, you have a greater likelihood relative to other individuals to have more meaningful employment, better socioeconomic status, and that it really is just a way for your own personal flourishing and then the flourishing of your own family to really develop and cement itself. Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the pushback on that? People saying that the success sequence could, if you teach it in schools, that you could be alienating kids who aren't in those situations, maybe have a single parent or something like that. What do you make of the counter arguments there?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen those arguments. The success sequence has been pushed in other states, and those arguments have come up. But what I would say to those critics is that as much as some individuals may not have the, an ideal arrangement, and we say ideal, what research shows tends to produce the best outcomes. That's not to negate any love or affection that those kids experience in those non-traditional arrangements. But we really want all these kids to have an opportunity to get into that type of arrangement. Mm-hmm. And if there's a way to inform them that, like, hey, we respect where you came from, but this is really an arrangement that's just proven to provide the most personal success, and we want to tear down any maybe negative perceptions you may have about 2-parent households, then all the better.
I think it's insane that that anybody would oppose that anyway, because what you're saying is, you're not requiring.
Exactly.
It's not like you're passing a law saying everybody has to do it this way. What you're saying is, if you do it this way, you have a 99.9% chance of never entering into poverty, and a whole other bunch of health benefits and relationship benefits and all of that. So it's a little insane that people would oppose even just learning about it, something that actually works. And no other context would people be like, oh, here's a solution that works, but I'm not going to tell you about it.
Yeah, and I think it also opens the door for parents who may have experienced less than ideal circumstances or just different circumstances to have conversations about marriage with their kids, right, to initiate those kind of conversations about what it looks like to have a healthy relationship or a healthy marriage, or potentially in contrast to that.
I want to get back to kind of the cultural pressures around this. And you wrote a piece that I think is either getting published soon or will be it was already published or is getting published soon, with the headline, "Boyfriends Are Out." You have this term, hetero fatalism. Tell me why. First of all, tell me what hetero fatalism is, and tell me why boyfriends are out.
Boyfriends are embarrassing, Brian. You should not have one.
Lucky for me.
No, so hetero fatalism is a term coined in academia by an author in 2019 who writes about how heterosexual relationships are doomed to end in disappointment, failure, regret. It's this idea that women are categorically unsatisfied with men and the treatment that they receive in heterosexual relationships. And so by entering into that kind of an institution or that kind of a relationship, there is failure at the back end. And it's actually interesting because I was reading this article a while ago, and in that article, she also mentioned kind of how hetero fatalism is just as true for kind of the the women that are unsatisfied in relationships as much as it is the men. And she specifically kind of talked about the incel population and how there's this creation of like oppression through involuntary action for either population just by the nature of the failures of the other sex, the other gender. And so it's this concept that kind of denotes normative, traditional heterosexual relationships as being inherently oppressive and resulting in failure and decline.
Yeah, I wonder why. I mean, well, first of all, so they're suggesting that those will like always end in failure. I mean, despite all the evidence that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, I think most people find that, you know, relationships that end badly, it's because the one or both of the partners are just extremely selfish, and that if you don't get into a relationship, particularly a married relationship, when one having kids, of understanding that like a core principle, a core feature of that is voluntary self-sacrifice, right, to each other, to your family. If you don't know that going into a marriage, then yeah, I think if you both continue to be selfish, then probably will end up that way. But that's very different than the argument on hetero fatalism. What strikes me is that is a very popular finding, or popular, or it's very popular among younger folks, and I just wonder why that is. Is that because they're just dour and down on relationships, and so it just sort of hits the sweet spot, or what's so attractive about that approach or that philosophy?
I think it's because it kind of absolves personal responsibility. That's kind of my first thought. I've like kind of these two running thoughts on why it is. If a relationship fails, it's not because maybe you were selfish. It's just because categorically it was designed to fail. The structure of it makes it so that it's designed to fail. The second thing that I think the reasoning could come from, I was talking to one of our newest team members, policy analyst Cameron Abrams, about this, and he brought up a really interesting point, and I think it has to do with kind of the time that we're in technology. And he said something that I thought was really quite clever. He said medieval peasants weren't questioning, you know, their sexuality. They weren't struggling kind of with hetero fatalism. No one was contemplating that necessarily. And so we kind of also have this opportunity online to contemplate these things in a way that we haven't before, and also have the opportunity, and I know I've said it so much, but to create these feedback loops with people that are experiencing similar situations, and then the few feel like the many, and you are closed off to kind of these other success stories, and you can write them off and say, okay, well, give it 10 years, and she won't be satisfied with him anymore.
Noah, are you going to be talking about hetero fatalism on your date on Valentine's Day?
I guess so. I mean, I'll have to get her opinion and see what she thinks. And
is that a first date? You got to get that out of the way.
Got to rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah.
Not if I want a second date.
You have that conversation over matcha, you know. And,
hey, you never know.
So what do you think about? I mean, does that to that thesis that it's it's popular and it's kind of it's one of the things that people believe about what's going on in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I mean, obviously it's a product of academia, but also a product of social circumstances and contexts that we live in the same way that I think certain critiques against marriage, both from men and women, are a consequence of, those ideas. So, for example, like manosphere critiques or really, far hardline, really strong feminist critiques of marriage. And both of these groups is critiquing it as an institution. As confusing and bizarre, especially incel language can be, or these critiques of marriage can be, especially with incels. I mean, half the time, I don't understand what they're saying. Whatever random pills that they're taking or whatever.
Yeah, I heard that recently that the new red pill was the black pill.
Yeah.
And I assume you guys know about
feminines.
clavicular getting frame mocked by ASU frat chapter president.
No
or
idea
having
what you
his
just said.
cortisol spiked by.
I know chapter president. I know those words.
Yeah.
It's this vocabulary. That's the thing. Even hetero fatalism, pessimism. It's this vocabulary that is totally out of reach.
Made up.
Was it Orwell said some ideas are so stupid it can only come from academia?
No, you have a new piece out there as well for National Marriage Week, a time for reflecting on marriage. You're not married, but you're reflecting on marriage. Explain what you mean when you argue that both feminist critiques of marriage and the manosphere hostility are kind of mirror images of each other. I thought that was really interesting. So feminist critiques of marriage, but also the manosphere critiques are kind of two sides of the same coin.
So I think these groups are really responding to the same stimuli, and that is the rapid changing social, cultural, economic dynamics late 20th century. Women had basically been relieved of a legal regime, at least in the United States, that had rendered them a degree of inequality with men. In certain points of history, that inequality was really acute, significant. So obviously the easiest reaction to that stimuli is, a really sharp critique of marriage and a heightened suspicion of men and those arrangements and their intentions and what they want to do, and in a heightened suspicion to anything that might look like an older, more traditional form of marriage, or at least from their perspective as to what that would look like. In the same way, the manosphere, incel movement, whatever you want to call them, they are reacting to similar stimuli of changing dynamics with women coming, greater equality, greater presence in the workforce, change dating dynamics. For example, dating apps, like we were talking about earlier, changes the entire landscape. But for many of these people, just the algorithms of dating apps gives them the perspective that they may be valued less, that women don't want them, that they're uniquely disadvantaged for whatever reason, when in reality it's probably just whatever the app is doing to their profile. So both of these movements are responding to stimuli, and in their most extreme expressions especially, they're kind of having a maladaptive response. Mm-hmm. And it's a response that sees these institutions as not beneficial, the other sex as always out to get you. You should be, have heightened suspicion of women, or you should have heightened suspicion of men. They never have your good in mind. These are really maladaptive reactions to changes in social dynamics. And I think just because these are adaptations to these, dynamics means that these, really intense critiques are going to be short-lived. We've had so many changes throughout the course of history as to what relationships look like. There have always been people who have been, kind of remonstrate or really kind of don't want to go with these changes or don't know how to respond to them. And, as things take their course, those reactions will probably decrease in their intensity.
Well, I think you laid out a very good point, and I think that, the idea of a horseshoe theory of Andrew Tate at a cafe reading Simone de Beauvoir is something I think we can all aspire to. But I kind of want to pair that with Hannah's observation about this discharge of agency, because I think that we have that on the male side as much as they have it on the hetero fatalistic feminism side. Did I get that right?
It was perfect.
Yeah,
it was wonderful.
If not, we can edit it out in post, I suppose. But the question I want to ask, though, is the whole idea of red pilled, black pilled, whatever the case might be. Again, it similarly mirrors that. It is a discharge of agency from the individuals who are apparently dissatisfied with the status quo or the received wisdom of marriage and families, right? So in that case, how do you push back upon something that they don't seem to be hearing or have heard and now summarily reject?
Well, there's no way to legislate them to have these opinions or to accept these arrangements are ideal. So that's certainly not the way to do it. But it really is kind of a cultural, influence of cultural attitudes.
Can there be policy change that perhaps that push the culture in that direction, or at least make ascendant some of the values that you're presenting?
Yes and no. So in terms of, obviously directly changing culture, no. But
we can't legislate new culture. Yes.
I think there's a way. There are ways to support communities, ways to support the social supports that exist for families, to make it easier to have a family, to make it more desirable. And I think Hannah was kind of touching on this earlier, is that a lot of people see marriage as unaffordable because there's something that they personally lose, or they believe that they personally lose by getting into the union. And I think that perspective, or fighting back against individual losses or perceived individual losses, is the right way to go about this. And so any policy that can improve what someone gains from marriage, whether that's making it like you spend less on a home, or there's some sort of subsidy or tax credit or what have you. People are looking at marriage through an individualistic lens. The law looks at it through an individualistic lens. It's about the rights of the individuals in the family, parents' rights versus children's rights, the rights of both spouses, which are basically indistinct based on the sexes. People care about marriage for what it gives to them. Whether that's the right attitude that an individual needs to have is another question, but that is the way that society is trending. So if there are policies to make it easier for someone to have their personal flourishing within marriage, and that flourishing actually helps the unit, whether they're aware of it or not, might be a good way to kind of combat these narratives that marriage is a like space where you lose, where men lose or where women lose.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that?
I just think more people need to touch grass. That's my unfiltered kind of thought on this. I think Noah hits
so more
on
green spaces is the policy prescription.
More open fields.
Right.
Yeah.
Marriage environmentalist.
Yeah, no, but I think Noah hits on the policies exactly correct. I think even in our conversation about the success sequence, even just educating people that there is a pathway to personal happiness and financial freedom in a very particular sense by following these patterns of institutions that benefit the individual is good. I think that commitment has to be restored as something that is not like a hindrance of self-identity, and it has to be a chosen independence by individuals. I think that communities have to start grounding dating outside of apps necessarily. People need to be able to meet real people so they don't get caught in these echo loops of, okay, well, I'm not the problem. There's just all of the women out there that are causing these problems, or all of the men are huge failures. And so even in that, there has to be this return to moral agency and moral responsibility to accept that maybe perhaps you are contributing to the problem of dating and contributing to kind of an economy and ecosystem that is not
when you're sitting
in
the highway griping about traffic, you are the traffic.
You are the traffic. You created it.
Yeah.
You touched on this a little bit, so I want to come back to it, Hannah. But this idea of there not being enough marriageable people out there, and and having that be a big concern. That we look at we talk about the statistics in high school all the time about half the kids can't read. If only 40% can do math on grade level. We're seeing social promotion and people graduating who are not ready to be out into the world, and then they're getting out. Maybe they get into college, but then they flunk out in the first year. I mean, it's all these problems. And so if you have your act together, and you're looking around and you're saying okay, I've got my act together, but there's nobody who's on my level. How real is how real is that concern for people between 25 and 30 years old?
I think it's incredibly real. We just saw some data recently from our friends at IFS, from Brad Wilcox and his team, talking about even how there's been a decline in not just marriage, but dating, how young people are not dating as much. And I think it's exactly that. They believe that there is not an individual out there that is worth it to them, whether you're on the man side of things, whether you just don't want to expend the capital or the time, or the woman side of things. And I think a lot of it has to come back to personal accountability, and I would totally push back against what you said of like, you have your stuff together. I think a natural part of dating is having the humility to accept that you're not perfect, and then also accept that the person that you are going to be spending this copious amount of time with is also not going to be perfect, and that you ought be willing then to grow together in a way that is productive and helpful. And so I think that, my
generation used to say things like, don't wait for perfect, you need perfect for you. That
Right.
kind of thing. Does people still say that, or no?
No, I haven't heard. This was my first time hearing that. But I think even going back to Noah's point, it's not so much that you shouldn't have standards, but it's like the particularized standards are kind of unhelpful. Like, I think a lot about this EDM kind of song that went viral off of a TikTok that was like, I'm looking for a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes, and it's like none of that.
We can get Jefferson to splice that in.
What's the sixes? The 6'5".
Yeah.
I don't know that. Sorry.
No, but none of that is going to be necessarily the best productive moral tool for telling whether or not you're going to be able to agree with someone in 30 years. And maybe that's not what you need. Maybe you are looking for a kind of financial stability that is outside of that kind of interpersonal agreement. But it's just these qualities that they are looking for are so very particular that the people that they are meeting are not marriageable.
Noah, you talk in your article on the positive side. You talk in your article about you say that, or you show research that shows that, quote, high connection couples report significantly higher life satisfaction. What's a high connection couple, and how do you know if you are one?
Yeah, so high connection couples, this is based off of some research from IFS, Brad Wilcox's people.
We should have just had them on, I think.
Yeah.
It's just, you come in remote.
That couples who spend time together, quality time together, they volunteer together, they're engaged in their community together. They have a real, sense of empathy between each other. They are concerned about the other's well-being. There's a real sense of, really willing to go to the other. Those are high connection couples. And couples that lack those traits or have, a lot more difficulty emotionally connecting for whatever reason, those are low connection couples. And high connection couples experience greater happiness, more satisfaction with their marriage, more satisfaction with their family, more satisfaction with their life trajectory. So that's an ideal to really kind of fight back again against the narrative that marriage is like a lose-lose for both sexes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like when I was in the dating pool, there was a big push to like do activity dates. Don't just go to a bar or go to a restaurant or a movie or something like that. Like go and do activity dates. I don't know if that was part of the research, but if you start, I guess, maybe doing activities together, maybe you end up as a high connection couple that will continue to do things together.
Right.
Are dating apps still a thing?
Yes, yeah.
They are.
Are they? Because the last time I looked in on them, I heard anything about them, it was I think the research showed that like it was just the same 30 guys were getting picked by all the women and everybody else. That's why you had all the incels, whatever. But it's still a thing. Is it still destroying
Yes,
dating
very
out
much.
there?
Yeah. And it's even been like narrowed more particularly. So if you fit inside a certain class of person, there is a specific dating app for you, so that you know that the people that you meet will be similar to you in that way.
Farmers only, it says.
Yeah,
Yes.
farmers only.
Yes, that's a real thing. Yeah.
There's all kinds of spin-offs. It's not just for farmers. I mean, there's
no, it's all the trades.
intersectionality.
Right.
Christian
going-
mingle, JD.
Welders only.
Welders, yeah.
Wait, really? There's one for welders?
Oh,
I have
yes.
no-
I was like,
yeah.
Now that would have been like, that's a very unique subset. Well, I want to jump over, because we talked a lot about the marriage side of family formation. Now let's talk about the child side. Very similar to talking about the marriage. So let's just, let's say you get to the point where you do have a committed partnership, and, let's talk about promulgating a family from there. What sort of hurdles are we seeing that families are running into, families that want to grow are running into in today's society, whether caused by policy or cultural impetuses?
We're seeing a lot of issues with cost. That's probably one of the biggest inhibitors to having a family or to having kids, as well as just cultural attitudes about what it means to be a good parent. So first, for cost, I mean, housing prices are skyrocketing. Most people view it as not inexpensive, way too expensive for them to get a home. Parents, at least, some research has shown that there is a correlation between the number of bedrooms in a home and how many kids you're willing to have.
Like a goldfish? Like kind of grows to the bowl?
I guess so, yeah. And, a small home is one of the only affordable arrangements for some people. So cost of childcare, transportation, food, especially healthcare, especially if you're a single mother, this is really kind of an acute problem. But then as for cultural issues, there was a good study out there that showed that parental self-efficacy, so one's own assessment of their capability to do something, so their self-efficacy at being a parent, parents who are closer to the poverty line or below the poverty line really struggle with self-efficacy when they were just overcome with the wealth of literature that say, you've got to do this, your kids have to be in this number of programs, you've got to optimize your kids' trajectory, I don't know, child maxing or whatever you want to call it.
We're learning so many new words
so many
today.
new terms. That those pressures, while those programs may be good and helpful for kids, they're not necessarily for everyone. So kind of having, it'd be good for there to be a cultural return to maybe a less demanding or intensive instruction towards parents as to what they need to do to their kids.
I want to drill on that because
Yeah.
I think you bring up a very interesting point, because what you just said specifically, we don't need to get the people in Webster's involved in whether child maxing is a word or not. But what you talk about is essentially the choices and methods by which existing parents are raising their kids external to the locus of determination for this particular hypothetical family. Is disincentivizing this family from becoming one itself or from expanding itself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for some parents, it makes parenthood seem impossible, out of reach, that they can't even, why even try? Like, if I don't have the means to put my kid in like a bajillion sports or whatever, why do I even try? So I think it's good to return a cultural narrative to, like, you don't have to do all of this like giant plurality of activities. You don't have to maximize or optimize your child. You need to raise your child to be a good person. And with the means that you can do that, do your best. So there's definitely a need to kind of reframe the narrative as to what's even expected of parents.
What about politics? Hannah, we saw that study last year that came out that went viral for 2 or 3 days, which showed that among 10 different things, Trump men who support Trump, marriage and family was one of the number one top issue or things that they wanted for themselves. Whereas Kamala women, it was among the bottom, like second or third from the bottom. But even among Trump women, it was only like fourth or fifth in terms of list of priorities for them. How much does politics affect this? The decline in people's satisfaction with dating and their desire to want to get married, do you think?
It's pretty directly related, at least in the context of people that push back on having children or getting married because they believe that it's not the right world for it. Like, I've also heard the arguments of, I wouldn't bring my child into this world. Like, what a terrible thing that would be. And that almost is always specific to whatever political party is in power at the time or has the most pull. But I think that you see the strongest deficit between men and women just because I think women are being kind of inundated with this intensity of individualism and this need for like identity outside of relationship. Because kind of jumping off of what Noah mentioned earlier, we're coming out of a cultural time where now both sexes are grappling with just new roles and increased women in the workforce. And I think that causes a lot of pause for women, especially on the Democratic side of things, who are kind of just as a party rejecting maybe the more cultural normative ideas for the sake of progressivism, but also for Republican women who are likely cycling through and thinking about whether or not it is beneficial to them to engage in this institution maybe earlier rather than later. And so I think politics plays a heavy role in it, especially based on which party is in the White House at any given moment. And also,
is it converse, or do you think it's directly related? With a Republican in the White House, Republicans are getting married, or you think it's opposite?
I think so. Yes, and I think that that just has a lot to do with kind of the cultural association of optimism with our political system, which kind of removes people from the communities that they're in maybe most immediately and into this kind of broader national community.
Well, I got married in the Trump administration, but I had a kid in the Biden administration, so I don't know what that says. What do you see in terms of politics out there, Noah? Are you do you think it has a big effect on people not like immediately discounting half of the dating pool because there's Kamala supporters?
Well, I think there's definitely polarization at the individual level based on politics. So not merely just for what Hannah was saying about, if the administration that exists is part of the party that I don't like, I don't want to get married because I feel like my kid's coming into a bad world. Even besides that, there is heightened tribalism between the parties in the personal level. I mean, Republicans won't date Democrats. People who don't align perfectly on a checklist of whatever niche political issues won't date someone who doesn't, hit every checklist or every check mark, which I think is just, again, have your standards. It's probably better for you to have someone who at least agrees with you to some degree on essential issues. But if you can't form a human connection with someone who disagrees with you on points of policy or certain elements of political life,
Good luck raising a kid.
Good luck raising a kid. You have a bigger socialization problem.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for people to really think about what marriage is, because it's not a pairing of two people together to be, ideological, ideational, like equals. You're not a unit to just sprout political ideology. You're there to love each other. I mean, who cares what exact policy points that your partner agrees with or disagrees with,
Yeah. One other thing on politics too, which I thought was interesting from a study that we did here at TPPF last year, is that although you consider conservatives to be anti-government, or anti big government or whatever, it was the Republicans who were more supportive of government getting involved in promoting marriage and promoting child having children with things like tax credits and paid family leave and those kinds of things, whereas the Democrats were saying, no, stay, I want government out of my decisions to get married and all of that. Does that kind of make intuitive sense, or is that kind of man bites dog?
I think, with current trends, at least on the right, I think it does make sense that conservatives are more and more amenable to the government doing something for families, taking a proactive, positive action. And not to wade too deeply into it, but I think there's been for the last 10 years, both in the realm of like actual political practice, in law schools, in political science departments, and just broader conservative spheres, wherever those may be, there's a reassessment as to what conservatism looks like. So there's a growing audience that suggests that, a government that takes more positive actions, meaning an actual, pushing or promoting something or doing an action instead of abstaining from action, is an acceptable way of governing. And I think as those attitudes increase, you'll see more people, more conservatives grow amenable to the idea of the government taking a very proactive stance for marriage.
Mm-hmm. And is it hypocritical for conservatives to be supportive of tax credits if they're for marriage, or
No.
is it consistent with our principles?
I don't think so. I think it promotes an institution that is valuable to kind of the qualities that we work so hard to conserve, which is kind of this community that is created through marriage, and then once, maybe children are added into that equation through the family and into the community, that encourages others to live with not just themselves in mind, which I think is very much aligned. I do think it is almost interesting, and I wonder if I should even say this, but I do wonder if we're running into almost like a caricature of what people believe like the Republican Party to be, and maybe it's this like trad family organization. So they think of kind of a marriage credit and they go, okay, well, that doesn't benefit me, even if they're interested in marriage. And maybe that's kind of where it's possible Democratic skepticism may be coming from. But I don't want to float that because I'm not actually sold on that myself. But I think that certainly it is well within reason to say that it's a conservative ideal to push kind of these more positive policies on these very clearly influential and beneficial institutions that kind of harken back to the founding of our nation.
Well, just a couple minutes left. Derek, any marriage tips on how to make it work?
Well, communication is very important. So first and foremost, make sure you're not using like maxing as an actual noun in that. So speaking the same language as your spouse, always a great place to start. No, I really appreciate the work that y'all are doing in this space, because there is an element of, obviously Andrew Brown, our Vice President of Policy, really got the ball rolling on a lot of this stuff, but so much of this, I don't want to say it's building a plane as you fly, because that makes it sound like haphazard and reckless. And that's not the case, but it is definitely like an icebreaker. And I mean that in like the nautical context, or it's like we're trying to feel our way in the dark, because a lot of the policy, Hannah was just talking about tax credits. I do need to disclaim that TPPF does not necessarily support or, oppose tax credits per se.
We're working on that research.
Yeah.
Right now.
But that being said, this is a largely unexplored area of social policy throughout, like both at the national and state level. We see countries like Hungary trying to just basically buy natalism. And that's not because they don't have any better ideas. It's because they fired a lot of arrows out of that quiver, and cutting checks is one of the few that is left. And so I really appreciate the work you guys are doing in really developing this nascent policy portfolio. My only question to y'all would then be like, so what's next from here? Where obviously we know what the process is internally, but what are y'all looking like for the next 18 months? Not necessarily in your marriage prospects, specifically in research, but in publication and advocacy, stuff that I have purview over.
It is the Family Success Project. So if the project is successful, what does that look like? No.
Yeah.
Well, ahead we have research that we're going to be coming out with. Research relating to parental rights, the history of parental rights, temporary assistance for needy families reform, how we can best use like social welfare programs. Mm-hmm. Particularly TANF, for their intended purpose. TANF does have, as part of its intended purpose, to support two-parent households. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at child online safety, the role of AI in the family, and that is, whether or not AI, as it exists right now, is kind of systematically or being a systemic disruption to the family unit. What does that look like? How can AI kind of coexist with or in the family unit in a way that promotes its flourishing and the flourishing of all the individuals in it? The success sequence, as Derek mentioned. So quite a few things ahead for us.
Hannah, what does family success look like?
I think it's, similar to kind of our mission writ large. What we're looking to do is to make Texas and America the best place to get married and have families. So as our policies that Noah kind of listed off pertain to doing that, that's the end goal. So we have quite a road ahead.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm not going to let you get away without offering your hot takes on the worst Valentine's Day gifts. I've given you all show to think about it.
Actually, since you're young, you can ask them what's the worst one they've gotten.
Yeah,
Name names.
Maybe one
Spill tea.
you've gotten.
Spilling tea now means like
I'm maxing spilling tea.
The idea of a gift is pretty lame. So like I once heard, and maybe this is actually
I want
tea.
Experience.
No, but like
you heard it here first, fellas.
Like I heard like I am writing you poetry, but it's not done yet, and I actually never saw any poetry at all. So I think like saying like I'm going to do something, or I'm thinking of doing something is a bad gift, even if the thought is really nice.
The thought is not what counts.
Right.
You actually need something shiny.
Some poor guy is listening to this and is absolutely mortified because that was him.
Gosh.
No gift given or gotten.
Gosh, well, I'd like to think I've given good Valentine Day gifts.
Except for that poem that you said you'd write.
Right. Who could forget? Gosh, I can't think of the worst gift I've gotten. I think about that one. Worst gift to get, though, just overall. The box of chocolates is just so...
So you go with the candy, huh?
It's so kitschy and like... I don't know. Maybe as a man, I probably shouldn't care that much about it, but it's like put a little thought into it,
Get him some nice flowers.
Noah's a flower guy.
We'll see about that one.
Some nice
Not
flowers.
even roses, like
Get him some
geraniums,
matcha. Yeah.
Well, thanks. This has been a great conversation. This has certainly been illuminating. If it hasn't been overall depressing, perhaps for the future of the country. So, but thank you for your insights. Thank you for what you're working on and what you're going to produce here in the coming year. So we'll be excited to see where this goes, because this is a brand new campaign for TPPF, and so you guys are pioneers pushing it out there. So we really appreciate what you're doing, and we appreciate you for listening and for watching. As we always like to say at the end of our show, in the immortal words of Sam Houston, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.